Hi Maria, how are you?
Hi, Sophie. Really, really good. And you?
Yeah, very, very good, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with me today. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, I'm Maria. I'm a co-founder of Weaver Labs. We are a startup working on the telecom sector and essentially building a product that allows for infrastructure sharing in a as a service model.
Oh, amazing, cool. Well, thank you so much again. I'm just going to kick off with some questions if that's okay. And the first one is very much a kind of a scene setting. So how do you currently see equality in tech and the telecom sector? And how do you think we can achieve a more diverse future?
So sadly, the unfortunate reality is that there is not much equality, and there is not much equality, not in gender, not in racial equality. It's a very white male dominated industry,
Sure.
and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the history that this industry has had, and where it has taken us. However, I'm really happy to see that more women are jumping into the space. Like, you are in
Sure.
tech, I am in tech, and in the UK there are a large number of very inspiring women in leadership positions,
Yeah.
who I look up to, and I think it's incredible to see how they're setting the tone of the industry from a female voice. I happen to be close to some of them, and for me, they're incredible mentors and role models. And I think that's exactly the way, right? I think you get inspired as a young woman when you see an example, or when you see yourself reflected into a certain person, right? The reason I got into research on the first place is because I saw a woman leading a technical team within the university. And I went and I said to her, I want to work with you. And the reason at that time, I was very young, I was 20 years old, and I really didn't want to go and work for an industry and for a company. And I said, I want to continue working in research. And I saw her and I was like, okay, so she has a cool job, and she gets to travel all around the world. She has great way of handling, a professional life setting with a personal life setting. She's a mom as well. So I thought I can be her. And that really led me into, obviously my life has taken different paths, but for that initial kind of like step, seeing an example and seeing myself in there helped me to decide to take a career in research and innovation. And I think that's a great way of encouraging females to, or any other minority, to enter into a different ecosystem. But there is another element that I think it's very important, and I've realized about that recently while interviewing people for technical roles, is that women, we tend to undersell ourselves a lot. And there's fierce competition in the market. And there are tons of studies that say that the average man would sell himself higher, whereas the average woman would sell herself lower. And we have larger imposter syndromes, and we have glass ceilings, and all of those cool words that now we can actually put words into the feelings that we have, but ultimately that's a barrier that we create to ourselves. And I don't want to put all the blame on us. I want to also say society, the way that we are brought up, the way that leadership is defined is very much into the male kind of persona, not so much of the women. So there are certain aspects, but I think example, it's a good one to start with.
Yeah, I love that. It's like the joke that a woman will always say, well, I'm not good enough to have imposter syndrome, which is exactly the point that you've illustrated. Thanks, Maria. In terms of, what do you think are some of the other barriers for women to get into the industry? You know, tech more widely, but also telecoms. What do you think are some of those other barriers as well?
I think one, it's easy to be intimidated by the industry. Okay, I'm sure it has happened to you and it has happened to me. I mean, you were the other day, right, speaking on the stage and in front of another, when we were at techUK for the DCMS event.
Yeah,
that room is predominantly full of men. I think it was you and I and probably one other woman, and the room was probably what, like 100 and 150 people, and it's a large percentage of you know. And when you're young and you need to, you know, step up and say, okay, so I'm going to own this room, I'm going to own this meeting, I'm going to own this conversation, it can be very intimidating. And I think the other way around would be very intimidating as well. I always say this to my colleagues, like, imagine you are in the other situation, that you walk into a room and it's full of women. You will feel outnumbered. So that's another way that I think it should reduce barriers if we positively encourage women to, you know, join most of these events, join more advisory boards, and have their pictures on, you know, the events, and it can help reduce that level of, you know, I'm intimidated by the industry. And I know that we are all doing that actively, right? We're trying to seek for more women to speak at events. We're trying to seek for more women when we are interviewing for roles, which is a great start. But there is another element of, you know, again, education and educating young girls that's perfectly fine that they're just men, you know, that, you know, you can own it as well. You can have a loud voice, and you can be motivating, you can be a leader, and they can be encouraged by you as well, right? So that's another element. I think education is the baseline always.
I think education as well, and kind of accessing the industry, exactly as you say, to sort of myth bust in a way, you know, to also say, don't be intimidated because it's this, or don't be intimidated because it's that. That's just such a great insight. Thanks, Maria. And I think as well, there are other kind of ideas or things that you've seen that the industry is doing to support, you know, increasing diversity and equality, that you wanted to share.
Tons of things, right? I'm so happy about it, because I always say the same, right? I mean, there's a lot of discussion around, you know, women not being treated in a certain way, or being treated in a certain way in an industry, in different industries. That's not the case for me, right? I've always been welcomed. I've always been, I mean, I consider myself quite successful in what I do. So I don't think, I mean, of course, there are some unconscious bias, but that happens everywhere. I have it. And you know, owning to it and admitting that we all have it is the first step towards change. So I think this industry is doing a lot of good work in encouraging young women from the university and all the way up. You know, when I was at King's, I was part of a program with Ericsson, British Telecoms, Vodafone, that would help but it would just like show by example with little projects, and just a day in the life of, you know, a senior person in any of these companies. Again, you know, example showing that there are women that can actually do this. There are tons of, you know, coding camps, and so especially in the software industry, girls who code, women who code, programming, like that's great. And there are tons of women-focused events as well, where we don't necessarily just talk about how tough is being a woman in this world, but we talk about our jobs, our work, that we are also quite intelligent, and we also deliver quite, you know, a lot of good solutions in this industry, and we do thought leadership. And I think that's great, because ultimately that puts us in a visible point, and then eventually you just naturalize the way of gender in this industry. So there are tons of things happening, which it's really, really cool.
Cool. Yeah, great. Thanks, Maria. And then I guess, you know, thinking about your incredible experience and all that you've achieved, what do you think, what would be your kind of number one piece of advice for the kind of future generations entering the telecom sector?
Don't be scared, be bold, be aggressive, but never lose your feminine side.
Love it.
I think that's important because we saw that, you know, with New Zealand's Prime Minister, who recently had to step down because of burnout, and she never lost her feminine side, right? We nurture communities. We like to push. We are leaders, but from the back, right? We like to push. And that's our leadership. And we see that that's so much in demand in the society that we live, which means that we are the next generation of awesome leaders. So be aggressive because you have to. Be bold because also being ambitious and asking for a lot is good, and you deserve it. But never lose that sensible touch that you have as a woman, because that's what the world needs more.
I love that. That's such a good answer. Thank you. And just finally, to come to the end, in one word, Maria, what does it mean to be a woman in tech?
That's a good question. And I've never thought about that. I guess what it means for me is to bring a different point of view to the table still. And again, with that, and I guess from the leadership position, it's being a woman, it makes me very easy to think about the community, think about the team, think about a different way of leadership. So that's what it means for me. And I'm encouraged to be a female in leadership because of that, because I see how it's used and I see how it brings good results. So that's exactly what it means for me.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much, Maria from Weaver Labs.
Thanks, Sophie. My pleasure.